Welcome to CBS News Primetime. I'm John Dickerson. Future food is here. The Agriculture Department Wednesday approved lab-grown meat, cells cultivated by science, not steaks from slaughter. But don't reprint the menus just yet. First, this.
Oh, this is a search and rescue mission, 100%.
Hope in the noises. Banging sounds underwater guide rescuers searching for the oxygen-starved submersible. In Paris, a search on land through rubble after an explosion on the left bank.
We knew that Don was a little different, but what it was, we didn't know.
And Case 1, how the world changed because of autism's first child, Donald Triplett.
All right, we'll see you.
But we begin our report with hope on Wednesday that banging sounds detected in the North Atlantic might be coming from the 5-passenger Titan submersible. But as the multinational search coalition scours the Atlantic Ocean, time is running out because oxygen is running out. If the estimation of the vessel's inventors is correct, the passengers would no longer have breathable air by Thursday. CBS News correspondent Roxana Saberi has the latest.
There have been multiple reports of noises.
The underwater banging sounds detected by Canadian planes for a second day are sparking flickers of hope in the search for the missing submersible. A team of experts is trying to figure out where they're coming from.
Human sounds, nature sounds, and it's very difficult to discern what the source of those noises are at times.
The Coast Guard also can't rule out the sounds could be coming from the Titanic itself.
It's the wreck site of the Titanic, so there is a lot of metal and different objects in the water around this site.
The search area is now 2 times the size of Connecticut and up to 2.5 miles deep. Deeper than stacking nearly 9 Empire State Buildings. With potentially just hours to go before the Titan's 5 passengers run out of oxygen, at least 8 more rescue ships are joining the international effort, and a French deep diving robot that can operate on the ocean floor is set to arrive tonight.
This is a search and rescue mission, 100%. We are smack dab in the middle of search and rescue.
Search teams are unsure if the vessel is sitting on the bottom of the ocean, where the conditions are near freezing and pitch black.
You're trying to find a special rock that might look like a rock on a sonar system.
Captain David Marquet was the naval commander of the submarine USS Santa Fe.
I think the most likely scenario, unfortunately, is they will not be found in time.
OceanGate, whose CEO and founder Stockton Rush was piloting the submersible, has faced criticism. According to 2018 court filings, a former employee said he was fired after voicing concerns about the Titan, saying it posed potential danger to passengers as it reached extreme depths. The same year, engineer Bart Kemper signed a draft letter from the Marine Technology Society, warning OceanGate that its submersible hadn't passed safety standards.
This is not a tourist submarine. It follows no code and follows no jurisdiction.
And Roxana Saberi joins me now. Roxana, you told us on Tuesday that the U.S., France, Canada are all involved in this search. But do they talk about how long these efforts are expected to go on for?
Yeah, John, the Coast Guard is reluctant to put a timeline or a deadline on the search efforts, even though they've warned the vessel could run out of air tomorrow morning. They're saying this is still very much a search and rescue operation. In fact, Captain Frederick told reporters today, we are smack dab in the middle of search and rescue. And he said sometimes you will have to make tough decisions if you don't find what you're looking for. But, quote, we are not there yet. And if they are, he said, that's a discussion they'd have with the families of the passengers first.
And Roxana, what else did that naval commander tell you about the challenges involved in search and rescue?
Yeah, John, David Marquet said, well, there are many challenges. First of all, it's deep water where the search teams are looking for this vessel. It's pitch black, and the remote operated vehicles that they have out there are searching for a very small vessel. It's about the length of a van. And it's going to be among debris from the Titanic or rocks, possibly. So it will be very hard to spot, he said, like finding a needle in a haystack. Now, he said that if the vessel is found, the Navy does have a system that is designed to retrieve it and pull it out of the ocean to the surface. It's like a long cable on a spool. But they had to break the system apart to transport it and then put it back together again. And then they have to put it on a ship out to sea. So it's a very long process. And retrieving the vessel itself will also be complex once it's found, if it's found. In short, he said, everything has to go right before the submersible's oxygen expires.
That's right.
John.
Roxana Saberi in Boston. Thank you, Roxana. To help us understand what it's like to be inside the Titan, we would like to talk to someone who has been there. Aaron Newman was a passenger on the submersible in 2021. He is also an investor in OceanGate. Aaron, take us inside. What is it like to physically be inside there?
Well, so I went down in 2021 in August and actually made the dive down and saw the stern and made it back. Now, it is I like to say it's comfortable, but not luxurious, right? There's room to move around, but not you're not walking around or anything. But it's as it's been talked about. When you're at the bottom, it can get pretty chilly down there, and it's meant to be a vehicle that's designed to be as safe as possible. So it doesn't have seats or anything like that. It has a ledge at the end. And room to move around, and it's designed to take people down in the most efficient way possible.
And on the trip that you took, what's the prep like? I mean, and obviously any vessel that you take of any kind, really, one has to prepare for things to go wrong. What were the preparations like, and was anything like this discussed?
Well, so certainly you have multiple days as you're making the journey there, right? So you're with the whole team of people where you have multiple days to cover protocols, talk about the design of the ship, talk about the history of the Titanic. So you're going through really an incredible learning process for multiple days before you would even get in the sub. So they would cover, the types of things like the drop weight systems. One of the most important pieces of the craft is the ability to drop those weights, which would allow you to gain back the kind of a positive buoyancy and float to the top. So that system is designed as robustly as possible, so there's multiple ways for that to drop. And it's designed to say, if things go wrong, it should float to the top as easily as possible. So hopefully we'll see that happen.
There have been some reports. We just had a report about issues that were raised about possible safety issues with the Titan. Was it safe as can be?
Absolutely. I mean, so I think to start with, those reports are on a different version of the Titan, not even on this version of the Titan. So it's a little misleading to throw those accusations at the current Titan version. But it is safety was the number one protocol. We covered everything from what would happen in a fire to what would happen if weights didn't drop. What are the backup systems to communicating in the worst case scenario. So there was a lot of training. And the fact is, the 5 people that are on board, these are not tourists, right? These are experienced people who have explored in many, many places. These are the type of people that will be calm and collected, work together to figure out a way to do this. I mean, you take somebody like P.H. Nargeolet, probably the most experienced submarine expert in the world in terms of his ability to, he's been diving for 60 years. So there is no team better that would be able to handle the scenario than the people aboard this craft right now.
Given that you know the craft and the people on it, what was your reaction to news of underwater noises being detected? Did that mean anything special to you?
It's hard to tell from this. We're not on the search and rescue teams. Obviously we're going to cling on to every possible thing that we can get, but it's hard to tell what that noise could be. We are just hoping with every ounce that we can that this is somebody on the inside, hitting the side with a wrench or doing something to try to signal, and doing it in a way on a regular basis to make it more obvious that this is a human doing it, not a piece of the Titanic banging against something or an animal making some noise. So these are skilled people who would have that kind of presence to do that.
Aaron Newman, former passenger on the Titan submersible, thank you so much for being with us and helping us understand this. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
Supreme Court Justice Samuel Alito took the rare step Wednesday of responding to reporting for a new article in ProPublica. That article details a luxury vacation Alito accepted from a hedge fund billionaire and prominent GOP donor, who later had business before the High Court. At issue is influence on the reading of the law and public faith in an institution of such power. Nicole Killian has the latest from Capitol Hill.
Supreme Court Justice Samuel Alito hoisted a big catch during a 2008 trip to Alaska that came with big perks, according to ProPublica. That included free travel on a private jet chartered by hedge fund billionaire Paul Singer worth $100,000 each way, plus lodging at a $1,000 a night resort, covered free of charge by then-owner conservative donor Robin Arkley.
The connection between Supreme Court justices and right-wing billionaires is a very legitimate matter of concern.
After the trip, Singer's hedge fund came before the High Court nearly 10 times. Alito never recused himself, and in one case voted with a 7-1 majority in Singer's favor. His firm was ultimately awarded $2.4 billion. A spokesperson for Singer said he never discussed his business interests with Justice Alito. The justice said he was not aware Singer had an interest in any party. Alito failed to disclose the private jet travel on an annual financial disclosure form, a potential federal violation. He argued the flight was not consequential because the seat would have otherwise been vacant.
My view is he broke the law.
The Chief Justice will address these issues.
The revelation follows similar allegations involving Justice Clarence Thomas, who reportedly accepted lavish gifts from GOP megadonor Harlan Crow, and Justice Sonia Sotomayor, who didn't recuse herself from a case involving the publisher of her memoir.
Justices don't consider the laws applicable to them, that they are above the law. And that is a problem, whether it be the president or the Supreme Court that thinks that.
And Nicole Killian joins me now from Capitol Hill. Nicole, is the concern of those you talked to about something specifically Alito did or didn't do, or the cumulative effect that this scrutiny of behavior will have on people's willingness to grant the court the authority it needs?
Yeah, more so a cumulative effect. I mean, keep in mind that Justice Alito is one of several justices under scrutiny. I spoke with Richard Painter, who was an ethics lawyer under former President George W. Bush. He actually worked in the White House counsel's office. He actually helped prepare Alito, who was then a nominee, for his Supreme Court confirmation hearings. He says he has a lot of respect for him, but doesn't know what happened in this particular instance. But he acknowledged this is more than just about one justice.
We want to believe that judges and justices are impartial and cannot be influenced. And I believe for the vast majority of federal judges and justices that is the case. But we've had too many instances in which billionaires and others who are well-connected have close ties with Supreme Court justices and other judges. We are now in a situation where the American people lack confidence in our judiciary and in the impartiality of our judiciary. We need to fix that.
And so he is pushing for a number of reforms. He thinks that, for instance, there should be an inspector general at the Supreme Court, as well as an ethics lawyer. Of course, Congress has a number of bills before them dealing with Supreme Court ethics reform. The Senate Judiciary is set to mark up legislation next month, but some Republicans argue that Congress may not have jurisdiction here. John.
Nicole Killian on Capitol Hill. Thank you, Nicole.
You bet.
Accused classified documents leaker Jack Teixeira proclaimed his innocence in a Massachusetts court. The 21-year-old Air National Guardsman was arraigned on 6 counts of willful retention and transmission of national defense information. Each charge could carry a prison term of up to 10 years. Some of what he leaked included information on the war in Ukraine. Federal Reserve Chair Jerome Powell appeared on Capitol Hill Wednesday before the House Financial Services Committee. He testified to lawmakers about the central bank's ongoing fight against inflation.
Inflation has moderated somewhat since the middle of last year. Nonetheless, inflation pressures continue to run high, and the process of getting inflation back down to 2% has a long way to go.
In order to reduce inflation to that Fed target, Powell reiterated the Fed may need to raise interest rates again before the end of the year. When it comes to jobs, he noted that more people are participating in the labor force and job vacancies are declining. Powell was also questioned about this year's bank failures. He expressed openness to new banking regulations, but cautioned against over-regulating small banks. A large search and rescue operation is underway in Paris. Dozens were hurt in a massive explosion in the heart of the city. We'll have the details. And later, why do we think things are worse than they really are? We will try to answer that question. You're streaming CBS News Primetime. One eyewitness to an explosion Wednesday in central Paris said it felt like an earthquake. Dozens were injured in the blast, including 4 who are in critical condition. Officials say at least 2 people are missing. MTS Tayeb has more.
In the heart of Paris, a blazing inferno after a suspected gas leak triggered a massive explosion at the Paris American Academy, a private fashion and design college with international students, including Americans. More than 30 people were injured, 4 critically. I saw a gigantic fireball 100 feet high, this student says. I was really shaken. My ears are still ringing. A massive search is underway as rescue workers dig through the wreckage looking for survivors. I'm extremely cautious about saying what caused the explosion and sparked this fire, says Paris's police chief, but we have deployed 270 firefighters, 70 vehicles, and the fire is currently contained. The blast happened near the Latin Quarter in Paris's Left Bank area that is known for its student population and is a popular destination for tourists. As the summer holiday season gets underway, a dark cloud of smoke hangs over the City of Lights. Now, at least 2 people remain missing tonight, but CBS News can confirm that at least one group of American students, 25 of them, are accounted for and safe. John.
MTS Tayeb in London, thank you. A judge has set July 26th as the first court date for President Biden's son, Hunter Biden. He is expected to plead guilty to 2 misdemeanor counts of failing to pay taxes as a part of a deal with federal prosecutors. The judge still needs to accept the plea deal. The deal will likely spare Hunter Biden from being prosecuted on a gun charge, which may have resulted in jail time. A California man prosecutors say used a stun gun on a police officer's neck during the January 6 Capitol riot was sentenced Wednesday. Daniel Rodriguez shouted Trump won as he was led out of the courtroom following sentencing. He will spend more than 12 years in prison for driving a stun gun into former Metropolitan Police Officer Michael Fanone's neck. His body camera captured the aftermath of the incident and him yelling out in pain. Fanone lost consciousness and suffered a heart attack. The nation's report card is in, and it is not good. Average reading scores for 13-year-olds have declined 4 points since the 2019-2020 school year, which is when the COVID-19 pandemic began. And math scores showed an even bigger decline, dropping 9 points. Scores in both subjects have been trending downward in the past decade. The Supreme Court is expected to issue a ruling before the month's end on the constitutionality of affirmative action and whether or not colleges should be allowed to consider race when making admissions decisions. A CBS News poll released Wednesday shows many people think the answer should be no. While the majority of Americans support affirmative action as a whole, only 30% of those polled for this survey say race specifically should be part of the college admission process. And that opinion is held across party lines. 45% of Democrats say race should be considered as a factor. Only 18% of Republicans say race should be. Axios alerted us to these extraordinary pictures from the graduation ceremony in Wuhan, China at Wuhan University. This is some portion of the more than 17,000 who, according to local media, attended the commencement. The numbers were inflated by those denied graduation ceremonies due to the pandemic lockdown. The city of Wuhan, from which COVID-19 originated, has become synonymous with the debate over just how it originated. A vow to return to the good old days. That's the promise we've heard from many political leaders, including our current sitting president. But what if that's all just a myth that leads us astray? An article in the journal Nature titled "The Illusion of Moral Decline" argues that the perception that things are going downhill is heavily influenced by the way our brains work, particularly two well-established psychological phenomenon. For more on this, I'm joined by the author of that piece, Adam Mastriani. He is an experimental psychologist and the author of the science blog Experimental History. Adam, you write that this idea of the good old days has been around since there were days, which is to say forever. How did you go about interrogating your thesis, which is that that's a bit of an illusion?
So there's no objective measure of how well people treat one another in the course of their everyday lives. We, can't go drilling ice cores in the Arctic to check ancient levels of people being kind to their neighbors. What we can do is look at surveys that are done over time that ask people about their perceptions of others around them and things that they themselves are doing. So, for instance, were you treated with respect all day yesterday? Have you done various kind things in the past 12 months, like look after people's pets while they were away, or give up your seat on a bus to someone who needed a place to sit? And what we find over and over again on these surveys is no change over time. And we find pretty strong evidence of that, which goes against this idea that people have become less kind, less nice, less honest, and less good.
So in their personal interactions, in their day-to-day life, people are essentially feeling pretty good about the moral order. But when they look at the society as a whole, they think what?
They think that things are getting worse. Yeah. So in another study, we asked people about what they think about people that they know personally. And they told us those people have gotten better on average. So it's as if everyone is standing on their own little island saying, my island is great and getting better, but every other island out there is bad and getting worse. But the thing is, if you visit those islands, the people there are saying, my island's great and it's getting better. It's your island that's getting worse.
So the reason this intrigued me, of course, is that in the national conversation, it is very much the case that people say things are awful, and often they have political motivations for saying this. But what are the cognitive biases that are in play in the brain? You say there are two. What is biased exposure?
Biased exposure is the idea that you primarily attend to and receive negative information about people that you don't know. So in the news business, I understand you call this if it bleeds, it leads. The main thing that I hear about people that I don't know is that they're doing bad things. They're embezzling money. They're doing terrorism. They're lying to the public. That's biased exposure, the first of these two cognitive mechanisms.
We're expending our last breath trying not to behave that way, just if I can speak at the point of personal privilege. So that's biased exposure. So what's biased memory then, the second cognitive issue?
This is the phenomenon where the badness of bad memories fades faster than the goodness of good memories. So, for instance, if you got turned down for your high school prom, that probably felt pretty bad at the time, but 20 years later, it's maybe a funny story. If you had a great high school prom, at the time that was probably pretty good, and 20 years later it's maybe a pretty good memory still. And so these bad memories tend to fade, you remember them less, or they even become good memories much later on, and the good memories stay pretty good. And if you combine that with the idea that we mainly look at bad things in the world, you can create this illusion where every day it looks like things are bad, but every day it looks like things are worse today than they were yesterday. But yesterday, if we would have asked you, you would have said that they were just as bad as today.
We'll try to keep this in mind as we sort what is discussed in the national political conversation. Experimental psychologist Adam Mastriani, thank you so much for being with us.
Thanks for having me.
It's that time of year again. Summer is officially here. We'll have tips on finding the right kind of sunscreen as you head outdoors. You're streaming CBS News Primetime. Welcome back to CBS News Primetime. I'm John Dickerson. Here's a look at our top stories. Crews searching for the missing submersible in the North Atlantic are hearing underwater noises for a second day. The Coast Guard says it is still actively searching the area with more machinery on the way to help. The sub was carrying 5 passengers to see the wreckage of the Titanic. An explosion in Paris sparked a large fire and left more than 300 30 people injured Wednesday. It happened near the Latin Quarter in the city's left bank area, which is popular for tourists. Officials have not yet said what caused the blast, but witnesses say they smelled gas in the area. The Federal Trade Commission is suing Amazon, accusing the company of a years-long effort to enroll customers in Amazon Prime without their consent, then making it hard for them to cancel. Amazon is denying the allegations. The company made $9.6 billion from subscriptions in the first quarter. Special counsel John Durham testified on Capitol Hill Wednesday about his report about the FBI. Durham was appointed back in 2019 by then Attorney General Bill Barr to review the origins of the FBI's investigation into potential ties between Russia and Donald Trump's 2016 campaign. He released his findings last month, 4 years after his review began. His report criticized the FBI and claimed the agency's bias for opening the investigation into the Trump campaign was, quote, seriously flawed, and said some agents involved had confirmation bias. He found no evidence of political influence. CBS News congressional correspondent Scott MacFarlane joins me now. Scott, what were House Republicans looking for from Durham's testimony?
Well, they gave this thing 6 hours, John. He gave Don Durham a day's worth of cable TV airtime and the platform of the House Judiciary Committee. So presumably they wanted to amplify what John Durham had to say. And this was the first time we heard John Durham speak publicly about this 4-year investigation into the launch of an investigation by the feds into ties between Russia and the 2016 election. So what became of those 6 hours? It's really the political version of a Monet painting. It is impressionistic art. Look at it and view it as you might through your own political lens. Republicans argued today and amplified the voice of John Durham in doing so, that the FBI went too far and too fast into an investigation that had all kinds of political implications into Donald Trump's 2016 campaign. They didn't have enough evidence or didn't have solid enough evidence to do so. That's what John Durham argued in his report. He did so today, and Republicans echoed that. Democrats counterpunched today at great lengths, John, to say that John Durham didn't find much of any crime, didn't bring a bunch of defendants to trial and win convictions for criminal misconduct, and the Democrats argue, whatever mistakes were made by the FBI through the launch of that investigation, they say have since been corrected. And oh, by the way, they add, there was collusion between the Russians and efforts to try to alter the 2016 elections, if not with Donald Trump, with people who wanted to see Donald Trump win.
Speaking of all of this past history, there has been a new move by the House that it voted to censure Adam Schiff. Can you tell us what that was about and what happened?
Yeah, this evening began with Adam Schiff, the California congressman who led the first impeachment of Donald Trump, with allegations that there was efforts to work with the Russians or interfere with investigations. Adam Schiff was censured tonight by a party line vote in the U.S. House, with some members of the House Ethics Committee abstaining or voting present, but this was a pure party line vote. We saw this coming down the pike weeks ago. They've been trying to push this measure to the floor, and tonight they did. Democrats surrounded Schiff on the floor when he was called to the dais to be formally censured. They cheered him. They applauded him, and then they shouted, "Shame on you," and "shame" to the Republicans. Take a look at that. You can see how the image changed tonight from Adam Schiff standing before the House Speaker to all the Democrats, all his colleagues standing with him, jeering Republicans and cheering Mr. Schiff.
In another matter, sort of in the same basket of federal investigation, a judge will unseal court records Thursday that identify who helped pay for Congressman George Santos's bail. What do you think that's going to do, and what's the sense on the Hill about what that information might lead to?
That's set for 12 p.m. New York time on Thursday. The federal judge who is handling George Santos's federal criminal case, his fraud case, is finally going to release the papers that show the 3 individuals or fewer who helped him make his $500,000 bond in that criminal case. He's been trying to keep that information sealed, saying that their health and safety could be at risk if their identities are known. He's even said, provocatively in his court filings, he'd be willing to go to pretrial detention, to jail, to keep those names private. Well, there's a put up or shut up moment tomorrow at 12 p.m. Eastern time when the judge releases those names. it's a moment that not just court watchers or those interested in his case are looking at, but the House Ethics Committee wants those names too, John, to ensure George Santos didn't violate the House gift rule in accepting help to make bond.
Scott McFarland in Washington. Thank you so much, Scott. The next time you go to the doctor for a routine checkup, you may be asked about your feelings of anxiety. This comes after new recommendations from the U.S. Preventative Services Task Force. The new guidelines state that asymptomatic adults under 65 years old should be screened for anxiety disorders using questionnaires and other screening tools. This stems from growing concerns about depression, anxiety, and suicide. Back in October, the group also recommended anxiety screening for children ages 8 and up. Wednesday marked the official start of summer, but as you head out to soak up some sun, it's important to remember to protect your skin. Nikki Batiste shares some tips and best practices.
With countless sunscreens on the market, trying to choose which is the most safe and effective can be overwhelming.
I tell people to protect their skin every single day with a broad spectrum sunscreen, SPF 30 or higher.
Dr. Elizabeth Hale says broad spectrum protects from both UVA and UVB rays.
What's the difference between UVA and UVB? That SPF number, that refers to a product's ability to block UVB, which are shorter wavelength, and those are the rays that cause sunburn. But every single day, ultraviolet A rays, or UVA, those are longer wavelength. Those penetrate every day, year-round, even through windows, through clouds, even in the middle of winter. They can contribute to skin cancer and otherwise aging of the skin.
There are two basic types of sunscreen, chemical and mineral. Mineral sunscreens are physical. They work like a shield, sitting on the surface of your skin and deflecting the sun's rays. The main ingredients are titanium dioxide and zinc oxide, minerals that are classified as safe and effective by the FDA. If you plan to swim or sweat, you may want a chemical sunscreen. It works like a sponge, absorbing the sun's rays. Although those chemicals can be detected in the blood weeks after they were used, some doctors say that does not mean they are dangerous. The FDA says more studies need to be done.
We recommend that consumers avoid products using oxybenzone, but use is associated with potential impact on our endocrine system and development.
To prevent skin cancer, Dr. Hale says it's important to wear sunscreen every day and to have a skin exam once a year. If you're worried about sunscreen chemicals, try a children's product. They generally have fewer and are just as effective. John?
Nikki Batiste in New York City. Thank you, Nikki. Charitable giving in the United States fell 3.4% in 2022, marking the fourth time in 40 years donations did not increase year over year. Giving totals dropped to nearly $500 billion, according to a new report released by Giving USA. It says the decline comes at a time when many nonprofits are reporting an increase in requests for help. But the organization's chairman says the results are much better than they could have been, given the recent economic challenges. Sweltering heat continues to grip the Southwest, while a major tropical storm brews in the Caribbean. For more details, here's meteorologist Jackie Jarris from the Weather Channel.
No big breaks for the brutal heat that continues across parts of the southern plains. More record highs were broken again today, or at least tied in places like San Angelo that made it up to 114 degrees. Now, the forecast into your Thursday, still plenty of triple digits. We could get up to as much as 117 in Corpus Christi, but feels like temperatures could be into the 120s plus. Now, as we head into your Friday, no big changes with that in terms of the temperature department. Even Dallas getting up to around 102 degrees. Now, severe storms tracking around that ridge of high pressure, so we may see more large hail, damaging winds. Can't rule out a few tornadoes, and this is going to be along the I-25 corridor in areas to the east of there. It may include the Denver metro area. Now, as for the tropics, we've got our tropical storm Brent, which got a little bit of more strength here today. That's going to track off towards the west around our subtropical high, heading towards the Lesser Antilles, where we have tropical storm warnings in effect. Now, for more in-depth coverage, you can watch the Weather Channel on cable and live on your favorite TV streaming device.
Jackie Jarris, thank you. The Department of Agriculture just cleared 2 companies to sell a lab-grown meat product. It looks like chicken, tastes like chicken, and it actually is chicken. But no slaughtering was required. Cuts of the cultivated meat start as fertilized eggs or a bank of stored cells taken from a living chicken. The meat is grown in steel tanks, then molded into nuggets or cutlets. But you won't see them in your meat aisle anytime soon. Lab-grown chicken is still much more expensive than regular chicken. For now, it'll be plated at expensive restaurants in San Francisco and D.C. But the novel meat market has the potential to one day meaningfully cut the climate impacts of agriculture if companies can entice customers and bring costs down. Coming up, the life and legacy of Donald Triplett, the first person to be diagnosed with autism spectrum disorder. We'll hear from the journalists who profiled him before his death last week. You're streaming CBS News Primetime. Donald Triplett, the man known as Case 1 when he was a boy, had an enormous influence on the treatment and study of autism. He passed away last week at the age of 89. Triplett was born in rural Mississippi in 1933, but didn't develop the same way other kids around his age did. Journalists Karen Zucker and John Donvan produced a documentary about Triplett's life. Let's listen.
They call him Don, but I first knew him as Donald. Donald T. That's how his name appeared over 70 years ago. It was in the first medical article that fully described a new diagnosis in children that we call autism.
Karen Zucker and John Donvan both join me now for more. John, tell us about Donald.
Donald was one of a kind, which is something that must be said about everybody who's on the autism spectrum, often pigeonholed, but everybody's different. And the saying goes, when you met one person with autism, you've met one person with autism. But Donald was the first person diagnosed. A very sweet guy, our friend. He trusted us early on when we showed up in his life in 2007, saying we wanted to tell his story. He doesn't talk a lot. He's not a great interviewer in the sense that he's not real fluent about his thoughts. So we talked with other people in his community. They told us what Don was like. And what they said to a person was, he's just a great guy. He's different. He's got his differences, but he's our guy. And they stand up for it in everything, in everything, all of his life. And they say it's not anything special about us. It's something just about him that we like him.
And Karen, take us back. Remind us or tell us how children like Donald were treated when he was a boy.
Well, Donald, in fact, was treated like most children originally. His parents had done what all or many parents and families did in the 30s and 40s when they had a child that was a little bit different. They were told to put them away and forget that they ever had them and move on with their lives. And Marion Beeman Triplett did that for a very, very short period. And then they sort of looked at one another, we believe, and said, we're just not going to do that. We're gonna take him home and we're gonna help him have a life. And he had an extraordinary life. He became part of a community that treated him just like everybody else, which is what we really hope for everyone who is a little bit different.
And John, in your reporting, you talk about the community response being such a crucial part of the support for Donald.
Yeah, it's our view that people on the spectrum, their shot at being able to belong in the way that we all want to belong, by which I mean have friends, be invited to stuff, be part of the joke, go to the dance, have friends, have kids show up at your birthday party, that all of that depends on everybody else around them. Accepting them and rolling with their differences and not shunning them, not abusing them, not mocking them, not separating from them because of that. And what Donald's community showed, and we're not entirely sure exactly why it worked there, but they showed that it's not that hard to have the back of somebody who's different. And what we often say, whatever happened in that town in Forest, Mississippi, we wish we could bottle it and send it out to all of the other communities in the world that could still do a lot better by the autistic people in their populations.
Well, that's right. I mean, we are all now in the community in part because of Donald's story and the studies of it. So, Karen, how has society's perception of people with autism evolved since Donald was a kid?
Well, I think in 1,000 different ways, and it continues to evolve. When autism was first diagnosed, we really saw people as very, very different in terms of the spectrum than we do today. Today, the spectrum is so broad that you can have someone who is unable to speak or lead an independent life and have very profound autism, and someone on the spectrum who can go to MIT and just have social and communication issues. And so the pendulum has swung really the other way, so that more people know about people who are out there communicating, who are part of society day in and day out. But there was also a large spectrum of people who aren't out there and who their families are still caring for from the original diagnosis.
Karen Zucker and John Donvan, co-directors of In a Different Key. Thank you, and thank you for your work.
Thank you.
Still to come, 235 years ago, the U.S. Constitution was ratified, and 34 years ago, a key ruling on the First Amendment. We'll take you back. You're streaming CBS News Primetime. There's a new list out for the world's top airlines, and none of those from America made the top 5 or even the top 10. According to Skytrax, Singapore Airlines has claimed the top spot. Qatar Airways came in second. Japan's All Nippon Airways was third, followed by Emirates and Japan Airlines. The only American carrier to crack the list was Delta Airlines, coming in at number 20. Skytrax got its results by conducting online customer satisfaction surveys across more than 300 airlines worldwide. Wednesday is a special day for the U.S. Constitution. It turns 235. On this day in 1788, New Hampshire became the 9th state to ratify the document, the number needed to make it the law of the land. The secretary of the state's convention at the time noted the time, 1 p.m., in case Virginia ratified on the same day and claimed the prize as the keystone of the federal arch. June 21st also marks the day in 1989 that the Supreme Court voted 5-4 in Texas v. Johnson that burning the American flag, a practice of anti-Vietnam War protesters, was protected under the First Amendment. In the majority opinion, Justice Brennan wrote, "If there is a bedrock principle underlying the First Amendment, it is that the government may not prohibit the expression of an idea simply because society finds the idea itself offensive or disagreeable." A major test of a document that even some of its creators didn't think would last this long. Up next, it's 48 hours for all of us here at CBS News Primetime. That's our report. I'm John Dickerson. Thank you for spending the hour with us.